I didn't pay attention to my own needs and wants because I needed to make my partner happy. The relationship eventually broke down and I got to question what's happening here.
It's the kind of hero's journey of, I'm struggling with this thing, so I go and learn about it. I go to really get to the depths of what's going on and what's been holding me back.
100% I was the nice guy. I had to do everything right. I was looking for someone with problems so that I could be the helper, the fixer, the caretaker. That's one of the biggest things we can learn in relationships, that we're trying so hard to garner something from a partner that ultimately we want from ourselves.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life, so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this.
Welcome back to this wonderful episode of the Authentic Man podcast. And today I have a guest with me, a man who I really enjoy speaking to, Sven Loss. We had a really beautiful conversation. You know, as you know, I record these intros just after the episode because I think it's like I'm in the energy of the episode and it's the best time to let you know what it is. And we really dive into multiple things. There's a lot of things here, but one of the things we really dive into is like, what are the patterns, how we can shift the patterns that stop us from getting the love that we want, why you're attracting unavailable partners and what you can do about that as well. You know, we touch on, as well as the relationship with self and the importance of that to creating healthy relationships. And that is a big theme. We talk about, you know, Sven talks about really beautifully about his healing journey with his father, which is actually a really beautiful part of the episode. Actually, I highly recommend. I really love that, but it almost left me quite speechless. How he kind of created that. We talk a lot about kind of manipulation and lies and how we unconsciously lie and manipulate our partners in relationship. We talk a lot about chasing love and how we kind of chase love. We try and chase the love outside of us that we really want. We talk kind of the umbrella of this, you could argue there's a lot of conversation about anxious attachment and how we can kind of move past that. We talk about self-worth and kind of building self-worth. And we also talk about the importance of the stories that we tell ourselves, you know, the truths that we hold about ourselves in the world and how the world relates to us and so forth. So this is a really, really gentle conversation. You're going to take a lot away from this in terms of, you know, especially if you attract unavailable partners, this is going to be really quite revolutionary for you. You know, if you really listen to it closely, it's going to help you really shift and change what's happening inside of that space. And I'm just super grateful for the space. It's a lovely, really gentle conversation that kind of sucks you in. And has you kind of really in it and really seeing yourself in the two of us, you know, as you listen. But I think the final thing to say is I'm kind of opening up my doors again for one-to-one clients. And I'm also going to be opening up my doors to a program for avoidant men, especially avoidant men, to help them kind of break the patterns of that. If you're interested in either of those things, there is links below to add yourself to a wait list for both of those, the one-to-one and the program. If that's as of interest to you, then just add your name in there. There's no obligation. You just add your name in and I'll contact you when the time is right and you say you're in or out, and that's it. So I'll let you jump into the episode now. Hello, listeners. Back with another wonderful episode. And I've been wanting to use this line for probably most of my adult life, right? So I say, back for the first time. This is a ludicrous album. If any of you listeners are as old as me, an album I'm very, very fond of. And the reason why that'll make sense to you is because today's guest, we actually recorded a couple of months ago and we had some technical problems. The gremlins got in. But as we discussed just now, this is the universe. The universe had it that this is the conversation we're meant to have. And people, this is the conversation that you're meant to listen to. So today's guest is a man who I followed for a long time, whose content I love. He has a wonderful way of delivering these complex ideas that occur in our dating lives and relationships, and that happen underneath the surface, underneath sometimes our awareness, or that line between what we're aware of and what we're not quite aware of. And through the way he records these wonderful reels, he kind of causes us to like dip below the line and go, oh wow, that's actually what I'm doing in my relationship, or that's what I'm doing in my dating life, or that's what's happening with this person I'm dating right now, which I think is some of the most beautiful content because it brings an aliveness to us, to ourselves. We receive the content, we take it in, and we learn something instantly about who we are and what's going on for us. So today we have the wonderful man that is Sven Loss. How are you doing today, Sven?
Hey, David. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm glad to be back for the first time as well. That was definitely very funny last time that it didn't work out. And I'm glad the universe brought us back together today to record this podcast. And yeah, thank you for the introduction about my content, my reels. I'm very happy that my content inspires those ideas in you and hopefully also in others. And yeah, as a consequence of my own journey, of my own healing, that's what I learned to understand about relationships. So I'm very, very happy and glad to be talking and teaching about this. And to answer your question, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's funny, one of my clients have pulled him up recently when he says it's good. So I'll just drop in, and I'm in this weird space of kind of winding down my not my business forever, but just for paternity leave, while also excited that baby's going to be born soon. Distance, you're listening to this a couple of months after it's recorded. So, but it was 39 weeks pregnant now. So there's this part of like excitement. There's this kind of fear. There's like worry. There's anxiety. There's that also knowing that any moment she can kind of burst through that door in my office door and be like, I've gone into labor, and then I have to like cut down tools and everything I'm doing. And in that moment, my life starts to change. So it's this really, unique cocktail of feelings and emotions that are kind of present through my day and, through me and Ursa's conversation. So it's a very unique moment in my life.
Yeah. I'm glad to be part of that. Glad to be part with you in this moment. Let's hope she doesn't burst through the door or in this podcast.
Me too. But as a question I love to start with, and I think we start with last time, is as you mentioned, kind of your journey. And I'm always curious about people, about what brought them on this journey to become coaches or to start their healing work. Like, I'd love to hear, what was the catalyst for you, and what was your journey like, and what did you learn along the way? And that's a lot of questions at once. Yeah.
So I guess as it is for many people, it was pain that started the journey for me. Back then I was in a relationship that, probably wasn't too healthy at that time. I didn't know that though. I only knew about relationships from my own experience of what I witnessed with my parents. So what I saw in that relationship was very normal to me. And I noticed that relationship doesn't work. I was exhausted. I was putting a lot of effort into the relationship, and eventually it broke down. And I got to question what didn't work out, what's happening here. And at that time, my mom kept sending me videos from a psychologist on YouTube, and I started diving into these topics and was seeing a lot of parallels of what he was talking about in his in his videos to my relationship. And I saw that what I'm experiencing wasn't quote unquote healthy. So I sought help. I hired my first coach and started working on myself, and saw that I I was part of a lot of unhealthy dynamics in my relationship, and started to understand myself better and started to see, wow, man, there's a lot for me that I can change. There's a lot for me that I can do differently. And so to cut it short, I guess the reason why I'm now in the position that I'm in is because I sucked at relationships. I really wasn't good at it at all. And so I got to learn a lot about relationships. I started from zero, and from what I've learned, I can now teach others and help them in their relationships.
Got it. Yeah. It's often we start off as a student. We never end being students. We start off, so many people I've spoken to, my own experience as well, is that there's some struggle, it's the kind of hero's journey of, I'm struggling with this thing, so I go and learn about it. I go to really get to the depths of what's going on and what's happening and what's been holding me back and why is this thing so difficult and terrible? And I look at other people and they're having such a glorious time. And through that, we kind of discover our own wounding. We go through that, and we find our gold and our dharma, our purpose in the world as well.
Exactly. So that's what happened to me. Now in retrospect, I'm really, really happy that it happened, that I got to that breakdown, that I got to the point where I questioned my behavior, my role in the relationship. And that was the catalyst for me to learn so much and to now have very different relationships, not just romantic relationships, but also my friendships, my family. I have recently had my father visit me. Currently I'm in Bali, and he came over to visit me for 3 weeks. And just the change of our relationship, right? In my past, we actually didn't have a relationship that was very loving. We were like strangers. He didn't know my friends. He didn't know much about me. I didn't know much about him. We were, just living alongside each other. And now, after having done that work, it's so different. There's so much love now. There's so much we can learn from each other. I can learn from him. He can learn from me. And I love that fact just in itself.
That's beautiful, man. And what shifted? What shifted in the relationship? Was it mainly you, or a little bit of you, or mainly him, or did you see it as a, co-created shift?
So it was both of it. Back then, when I started my journey, at the same time, pretty much, maybe it was within a few weeks, my parents separated as well. They started having a lot of issues, and as a consequence, my father and me, we were talking quite a bit on the phone, and I told him about my experience from coaching, from getting help. And he started to see a lot of parallels to his life and to the dynamic that he had with my mother. So he started doing his work. I started doing my work, right? And that led us to have a very new relationship, right? The system theory, one part of the system changes, so the whole system changes. So I changed, he changed, and so did my mother, and that's the beauty of what I'm witnessing. And then there were a lot of things, of course, that I was resenting my father for. As when I grew up, he was very reactive. He was very angry, and not just towards other people, but also towards me, towards my mother at the time. And there was a lot of resentment for that, and I judged him for it. And of course, growing up as a young boy and witnessing that, I swore to myself I was never going to be like my father. I was never going to be that angry. So I suppressed my anger, and I suppressed a lot of the behaviors around that. And doing this work and now being comfortable with my anger, I of course forgave him for that. I understood, okay, I'm not condemning. I'm not saying it's okay to shout at your kids and to shout at your wife. Not at all. And I could understand where he came from. Right? And seeing that with love and compassion, he could, of course, feel that I looked at him differently. And yeah, in a way, maybe my eyes, because I looked at him differently, he looked at himself differently and could start to forgive himself. And finally, with that, he changed his attitude towards anger. And yeah, it's absolute. For me, it's really weird. Like now sitting with him in a restaurant where a lot of people are talking with loud music. In the past, he would have erupted and would say, "This is way too loud. All these people around me, I can't stand that." Now it's like a Zen master sitting there enjoying it. Yeah, I love that.
Wow, that's incredible. It's the kind of
and as a matter of fact, I got to help him as well. Because as you now know, I started becoming a coach, started becoming a healer, and eventually he reached out and said, "Hey, I would like to work with you if that's an option." And yeah, very triggered for me in the beginning, but it worked out super well. And so made space for a very new relationship between us.
Wow, that's really like humbling as well for the both of you for him to reach out. For him, it must have really taken a lot for him to come forward and make that request. Yes. And kind of come and go. I'm going to learn from my son because for a lot of dads, there's this kind of hierarchy of father, son, and father knows everything, son doesn't know. But for him to come and kind of become the not the child so much as like the apprentice, the learner, if I can put that out there, must have been like incredibly powerful to kind of see your father from that perspective after all those years.
100%. That was big step, and yeah, in a way, it probably was the necessary step because in the past, right, exactly what you say, he saw himself as higher, as above, and just that step of saying, "I'm going to ask him to help me." Probably even in that decision, there was a lot of healing. Right, to be more humble, to put himself on the same level. And for me, it was beautiful because I looked at my father on the same level, and that's a great experience. And it has stayed that way, which is even more beautiful for me and for him.
It must have opened up a lot of like empathy and compassion and understanding for all the ways he had been in the past, and you'd have got a really intricate view into the world that created the man that you experienced, your father, the things that happened to him in the past, how he was treated, like in a way that most sons will never get to understand. If you're doing work with your father, asking the deep questions and sending him off with worksheets and meditations and embodiment practices, like that's a really deep relationship to a deep way to experience your father.
Exactly. Maybe we would have had conversations, but probably never to that depth. And it's exactly how you say, that opened the space for so much empathy, so much understanding, where I could see, all that anger. Of course, I'm doing this work, so I know anger is an adaptation to hurt, but then really hearing what that hurt was, what he had experienced in his own past, and putting that all together. And I know that if I hadn't started doing this work, I probably would have just repeated the same relationship that he had.
Yeah. Well, it's powerful, so powerful. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned you said there was like a role that you used to play in past relationships. I'm interested. What was that role that you were playing in your past relationships, and what was the impact of that on the relationships of that role you played?
So, I mean, I played many roles, maybe, yeah, I mean, you have had a look at my Instagram page, so you've seen a lot of these dynamics that I'm talking about. I was in all of those dynamics myself that I'm portraying there. So some of the roles that I took on, 100% I was the nice guy. I tried to be the perfect boyfriend, right? To do everything right, no slips. And whenever I did, I shamed myself. I received shame from others. I was the caretaker, right? I was looking for someone with problems so that I could be the helper, the fixer, the caretaker, right? Because there was a role that I took on in my childhood with my mother and also with my father, but especially with my mother, where I tried to help her with her problems so that eventually she would become available to me. And that was the same thing that I repeated in my relationships, which of course that has nothing to do with love, because I'm constantly saying, not consciously, right? I didn't know that at the time, where I would say, hey, the way that you are is you're not good enough yet. I first need to fix you, and then you're good enough to love me. And yeah. And as I also mentioned before, I rejected anger in myself. I was, as I said, I was the nice guy. I was agreeable. I would do what the other person wanted from me. And when my boundaries were crossed, I wouldn't stand up for myself. I wouldn't speak up for myself. I would, just accept it. Or it's not acceptance, that's tolerance. I would tolerate that.
And what was the impact of you? What was the impact on the relation? What was the impact on you? And what was the impact on the relationship of you kind of fulfilling those roles and being that way in relationship?
Being completely unfulfilled. So that's one. I was very unfulfilled. I was very dependent on the other person. And right, that feeling for me that people, or especially in the relationship, I was being taken advantage of. So when I start with the first one, my focus in the relationship was always external, right? My focus was, I will make her happy. And when she's happy, then maybe I can become happy. So when my focus was making her happy, I skipped my own needs. I didn't pay attention to my own needs and wants because I needed to make my partner happy. And if we don't put our needs forward, if we don't voice our needs, if we don't share them with our partner, they can't fulfill them, right? So I wasn't fulfilled, and that's where a part of my resentment came from towards my partner, right? Which also would create distance. I was very dependent, right? I needed my partner also because I didn't want to ever be alone. I was very dependent on having a partner. And it worked. It worked very much against me. I felt powerless. I felt sad. I felt exhausted. I felt like I was taken advantage of. So, in short, I was unfulfilled. I was unhappy. I was exhausted. It led to me burning out in the relationship. And it also led to me burning out at work and with my friendships, with my family. It was a big burden for me to carry. 100%.
It sounds like two things that come to me is like there's a lot of chasing. There's a lot of chasing in there to the other person to get love, to get attention, to feel desired, to feel wanted, while also masking that you actually want anything in return. You know?
Yeah.
It's the kind of the kind of typical nice guy of the kind of covert contracts, as Robert Glover would call them, where
beautiful observation.
I'm giving, but I'm giving with the proviso of like, oh, if I give this, eventually I don't have to ask what I need. You're going to intuitively know, and you're just going to start to give it to me in return. And then I'm going to feel loved, and then we're going to be really happy. And
yes,
why this comes to mind is, I work with a lot of avoidant men in particular. And my partner works with a lot of anxious women, and I coach her clients. And this dynamic comes up with a lot of the women, when I talk to them. And to say listeners, anxiousness and avoidance from an attachment point of view isn't rooted in gender, because I know some people think it is. But this is like kind of textbook, isn't it? Kind of textbook anxious attachment playing out and trying to secure a relationship. And then we hear this in the kind of wider world as well, people being like, oh, there's no one out there that wants a proper relationship. There's, everybody, like no one wants to fulfill my needs. And like, without, now you've done the work and you can see that actually this is like a dynamic that was created for yourself. How did you there must have been a moment when you were like, oh, you probably picked up the book Attached, like a lot of us did, or a lot of people did. And you were like, oh my God, this is so textbook to what this book is telling me, or what this article is telling me.
Yeah, 100%. So it was even, there was a distinct moment for me that I realized. So I actually got an epiphany, not in my relationship, but at work. I was sitting, it was at COVID times, and right, because you were talking about that we feel like we're not wanted, we feel like we're not needed, we're not good enough, or whatever our story is, and then we try I tried to shower my partner with affection, with love, with quote unquote love. What I did there wasn't love. I tried to do everything so that she would reflect back to me that, okay, you are good enough. You are wanted. You are loved, right? Which is this perpetual chasing. Now I was in the role that I had to convince my partner that I am all of that, so that she would reflect that back at me, right? Because without her, I didn't feel any of those things. And I sat at work with exactly that. I sat at work and I realized, because I was preparing something for the C-levels in my company, so the CEO, CPO, for a big deal. And I was sitting there and I was summoned for a meeting, right, with the high bosses. So me, very young at the time, I wanted to impress everyone in that meeting. So I tried to think of things that were very smart to say. And because I had just started doing this work, I was thinking, why am I doing that? What's in this for me? Why am I doing these things? And I noticed that, I'm trying to say these smart things so that they would say, I'm smart. And then I could convince myself, or I could then believe myself that I am smart, or that I am good enough, or that I am a worthy person, right? Whatever that is. And in that moment, it clicked for me, and I realized, wow, I'm just trying to convince myself. But if I just change that in myself, that view of myself that I'm not these things, then something else becomes available. And in that exact moment, I had a cascade of feelings, like of happiness, of joy, that just came through me, because I understood I didn't have to convince others any longer that I am all of those things. If I can just understand in myself that I'm not, right? I'm not that guy that I think I am, that I'm not worthy, not enough. I don't have to convince anyone. And when that clicked for me, I didn't have to look at my partner any longer to tell me, hey, you are good enough, you are wanted, you are all of these things. And that opened, right, at the time, it still took some time for me to really realize it and to translate that into the relationship. But the more I understood that, the more I embodied that, the freer I became in that relationship, right? The less I depended on her for my worth. I could depend on myself for my own worth. And yeah, that relationship didn't work out, right? I progressed, and there wasn't the room for her to progress in the same way, so the relationship ended. But it was a beautiful learning for me to have that, right? To understand that. And I think that's one of the biggest things we can learn in relationships, that we're trying so hard to garner something from a partner that eventually or ultimately we want from ourselves. We don't want it from a partner. We want it from ourselves. And when we get that, we can show up in the relationship from freedom and not from need, not from, I'm lacking something, so please fulfill me. Right? Now I'm feeling whole as a person, so I can be with someone from that energy. Yeah.
It's a powerful moment to experience, when you suddenly realize, man, I spent my whole life not just in work, but in relationships and, probably through family and friends, chasing, trying to grasp onto the love and poke them to almost, it's like trying to poke people to then give you the love that you want. And I mean, poke them in. If I can just do the right poking combination, like on a safe or something, I'm going to open it up, and this constant kind of efforting, being on the kind of hamster wheel, to one moment realizing, wait a minute, I can just give myself the thing that I want. I can just give it to myself. I can cultivate this self relationship with self. And then I don't need to keep trying to in these covert ways, trying to get what I'm desiring from the world.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's where our coping mechanisms, our protective mechanisms, or our behavior adaptations that we pick up in childhood, that's how we bring them into our later lives. And I feel super grateful that I understood it back then, because it freed so much in me, knowing that other people will stay blind to that, right? They may not ever notice that, and they may still be in that exact dynamic, right? Where they try to garner love and acceptance from the people around them. Whereas that will never be enough. That will never really get you to the point that you want to get to. And yeah, it's so slippery, right? Especially, I think what made it so hard for me is I became so good at reading people. I became so good at reading every notion. Oh, okay, they are nodding this way, they are talking that way. I need to be exactly like that, right? I even, sometimes I adapted the speed of talking that I had to the person I was sitting across, right? Because I thought if I speak their speed, they will like me more, right? It's ridiculous. And how hard that was, how exhausting that was. And I did that with every person that I met. I wanted every person that I met to like me. If they didn't like me, or when they didn't like me, man, that was a lot of shame for me. I needed that. And yeah, understanding that, seeing that later on, it was a very powerful moment, and also a very sad moment. Because I realized what I had done all my life was chasing something that didn't exist. Of course, I didn't know any better, but at the moment I was like, what did I do? What did I do? But by no comparison, right? The freedom that I gained from that is much bigger than the sadness, the grief, to an extent, the shame that I felt for what I did for a long time. Yeah.
And I imagine you see this in clients constantly, this kind of grasping.
Yes.
What are some of the ways
100%.
that you see in the people you work with, them, I call it grasping, you could call it trying to, get reinforcement and validation and reassurance of their value and worth, whatever you want to call it. How do you see them doing that in their lives and in their relationships?
A lot by similar patterns or behaviors that I witnessed in myself. Right? Some are always trying to to do the right thing, to be the perfect partner, the perfect girlfriend, the perfect boyfriend. Others, which is very common, they hide their needs, right? Like maybe not so much in the active way, but they feel like they don't know what their needs are. They feel like they don't know how to communicate their needs, right? Out of a fear that if they communicated them, they would not be worthy of love. They wouldn't be worthy of accepting. They can't be accepted that way. Most likely because that was their reality at some point in their life. Or what happens a lot is people hiding their feelings, not being able to be vulnerable with their partner, out of a fear that if they were vulnerable, if they were honest with what's going on for them, that they get rejected. Right? And then if we want to go to a little bit more of the quote unquote darker side, is where they would lie about what they want, what they need in a relationship, or they would try to get the partner to do something by doing something, right? What I talked about in a few moments ago, when I learned what to say in order to get the other person to like me. It is manipulation, even though it's not really compassionate to say that. But in the end, I wasn't true to myself. I didn't say what I really thought, what I really felt, in order to get accepted by the other person. Right? I didn't show who I really was. And that's something that a lot of people do in relationships, subconsciously, of course, right? There's no one to blame for that. And people do the best they can, right? They've never really learned anything different. But yeah, those are some of the ways that I see in the people that I work with. All of the things that I also did. I did all of that.
And it's interesting because I think, we all think we're good people. Everyone thinks so. Yeah. Most people think they're good people, and in relationship, they're good people. And when we start to kind of look at how we've been in relationship, and we start to see the manipulation, the lies that we've told, the ways that we've tried to control our partner, we don't necessarily do them consciously. And when we start to do this work, and I'm sure you see this with your clients, is we start to see like, wait, I'm actually not the good person that I've been making myself out to, maybe even to my partner or to other people in relationship. I'm doing all these kind of like quite shadowy things, these quite harmful things to people in the aim of getting what I want. How do you see that landing for people in those moments when they start to see themselves in a slightly new light and new perspective?
Can be very, very challenging. I think this is a point that's absolutely necessary to see, but it can be very challenging, especially, and that's usually the access point for people to see that, right? A lot of the people in that come from the role that I had, right? One of the biggest complaints that I would shower my coach at the time with was, I only attract narcissists. I only attract people that take advantage of me, right? They aren't really honest about who they are. They lie, they manipulate. But then seeing, okay, I also have these traits in myself, makes it possible for them to see their ex-partner or their partner in a different light. Usually, right, we attract someone and we get annoyed about something that we also have in a way in ourselves. So I know a lot of people first meet that with a lot of, there can be guilt, can be shame, but leading or helping people to see, look, you're not doing that because you're a bad person. You're doing that because it was the best way you learned right? From modeling your parents, copying your parents, or copying the environment that you grew up in. You're not a bad person. You just did the best you could. And now that you are aware of it, right, can you be responsible for, right, if you want to create a relationship that's based on love and honesty and mutual kindness, is it effective to keep doing that? And most likely the answer is no. So can you be responsible for choosing different behaviors now? And that will take time, right? It's not like, oh, now I saw it. Oh yeah, I did manipulate. Now I'll change it. Bam. And I'm a changed person. That can be tricky. Right? There's practice involved in that. But seeing that and having the humility and the honesty towards yourself to say, okay, I can see these qualities in myself. I can see that it's not effective for the relationship that I want to create. Therefore, I want to take the responsibility to do something different going forward. Yeah.
And I think coming from my side and as a man, as an avoidant man, it's interesting because there was a kind of moment in my life where I realized how my behavior had caused pain to my past girlfriends. There was a moment when I was like, oh my God, when I'm really cold, like all the stuff they're saying and how they're hurt and blah, 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 where I would just kind of put up a wall of like, oh, like this is your problem, like you've created this. And I as a moment where I saw all the moments where I kind of disconnected or I wasn't completely truthful. I didn't say, in the moments where I said I felt unsure, oh, I'm not sure where this is going, in my heart was feeling I'm not sure. I didn't communicate that, and I kept maybe seeing them or dating them or something like that. Or, and there was a moment where I realized, I was like, wow, all these little moments where I hadn't been completely honest, or I had been only thinking about what I wanted and what I needed, or I didn't really communicate what I was feeling or what I really needed. I had both created my own pain in relationship and I'd created the pain in for them as well. And I remember the feeling, as he said, guilt and shame, like I'm a bad person and I've always been a bad person and I'll never be a good person. I remember feeling that like, I'm stuck this way. It's never going to change. And feeling this really heaviness of like, I should just, at one point I was like, I'm going to stop dating. That's the only way I can not hurt anybody is if I don't date or I don't get into relationships. And it can be a really, difficult moment, and I've seen it in clients before and see it myself as I'm explaining, because we don't want to feel like we're bad as human beings. It's the one thing we are trying to avoid at all costs. I think, even if even the worst people in the world that we look at, they believe they're doing good.
Yeah, right. 100%. And most likely because or it's not most likely, I can assert that, right, if someone is bad, right, someone who's bad, even when we just listen to parents, I mean, at least I grew up in the way that the good child gets something for Christmas, the bad child gets punishment. Those were words that I heard, where my grandma used to say, a bad child, they get beaten, right? So we hear that growing up, that bad equates punishment, and the worst punishment for any human being, I would assert, is to not be part of the tribe, not be part of the human family, to not be accepted, to not be loved. So we develop our own means to get away from that. And one of the means that you temporarily had back then was, damn, I'm not going to date. If I have these tendencies, these behaviors, I'm not going to date. So I definitely agree that there is one of the feelings that people want to get away from. And I also believe that people inherently, they are good people. Right? And we can take the saying that's around, hurt people hurt people. If someone reacts in a quote unquote bad way or displays bad behaviors, then chances are very, 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 very high that they experience that somewhere along their life.
And we see now, this picture of like a lot of us have got these maybe what we call kind of maladaptive strategies for getting love. Manipulation, chasing, shape-shifting, wearing masks, or it could be, pushing love away. It could be, trying to protect themselves from love all the time, or fearing that love's going to be dangerous, fearing intimacy is going to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Where do we start? Where do you start with people that you work with to kind of bring them into a place of maybe more secure expressions of desire and love and loving?
I usually start with, so when people, especially when they work one-on-one with me, is just starting with whatever is present for them in the moment. Right? Or whatever issue they are seeing in their relationship, right? Because it always gives access to something that's deeper. So, right, any behavior pattern, something that people keep doing or keep seeing in their relationship, right? The one common denominator with you and all your relationship problems is you. Right? Even as much as people always want to blame everything on their partner and say, yeah, I keep meeting partners that are unavailable, I keep meeting partners that are so controlling, right? If you keep attracting the same person with a different face, then there must be something in you that's calling that forward. So what is it? Why do you keep attracting people that are controlling? Right? Why are you okay with that? And to phrase it in a different way. And then we can see, okay, there seems to be a self-worth problem. Or there seems to be a story around you that you don't deserve any better. Right? And I like to work with people on exactly these very deep-rooted stories, these very deep-rooted woundings. Right? Where did that show up? Where did you experience that the first time? Because when we address it at the root, then a lot of these behavior patterns collapse in itself. Right? Someone that has low self-worth will be inclined to be in relationships where they aren't treated very well. And I want to clarify, right? People do not have low self-worth. People believe they have low self-worth, or they see themselves as if they don't have any worth, right? There's just also that is a story. But if they manage to move past that, someone who believes I'm not worthy, they will attract someone that mirrors exactly that to them. They will attract someone that is controlling, that can be abusive. And they are, quote unquote, okay with that on a subconscious level. And once they move, clients or people, or and me included, once we move on from this view of low self-worth, we're able to attract different people into our lives. So I really like to work with people on the patterns, on the behaviors that keep showing up in their relationships. What's something that you witness in your relationships? What are common problems? Maybe even at work, right? It doesn't even work as a relationship, or with your friends, with your family. And using that as an access to see, okay, what are the woundings that you carry with you? Right? And then giving room for the person to process the pain, to heal the pain. That's how I like to work with people.
Yeah, as you said, there's always something from the present there's something that's happening now or just happened, you know, that's is a window into what's occurring, a window into what has kept occurring in their lives and their relationships, in their careers even, that can give us access. You know, like you said, if there's a pattern in your life that you're unhappy with, it's not the other people. It's not that God is sending you all these emotionally unavailable partners and that's all there is. Because, you know, we can sit here and I can tell you, I've got some clients of mine who are so open to a relationship and so wanting to go deep into a relationship. It's when I think of patterns, the one I think that blows me away sometimes is that people have a pattern of deliberately, unconsciously choosing people who don't want what they say they want.
Who don't want what they say. Yeah.
Like if I'm like, I want a loving partner, I want a loving relationship, but I keep being attracted to, I keep attracting people who do not want that, who do not have the capacity to give us that. Like as a pattern, why that's so strong is because you have a radar and you are picking these people out like a sniper on a rooftop out of hundreds of people around, like through, you know, when you think about it through online dating now, you go onto online dating and you're swiping and somehow through the pictures, through their bio and through the little conversation you have, you find the people who are mostly unavailable more attractive than the others. Like that's when we really think about patterns, like that starts to like blow my mind, that there's like such a internal radar that's unconscious that many people have. It's like, it's mind blowing because it's so subconscious. It's so like under the radar. It's so subtle.
Exactly, right? And that's where we find resonance. That's exactly where we can use our behaviors, where we can use the way that we speak, right? That finds resonance with the other person, which is why it's so beautiful if we get to the bottom of these subconscious patterns that are playing out in life. That's where the keys are, right? And very important, it's not in the other people, it's in us. Just when you think about it, how, right, when we say, I need all the people that I attract to change, right? We have no power to change anybody else other than ourselves. But if we stand there and say, well, all these people need to change, we're powerless. We're already powerless. We're in that victim position. Once again, not to say someone puts themselves in that position voluntarily, but that's where they find themselves. And then, right, but it's something in us that attracts those people. And even I know that pattern myself, the one that you're speaking about, and also maybe you when you work with people. It's one thing that comes up very often is I didn't notice. I didn't notice that they didn't want a relationship. But most likely they said that on the very first date or on the second date, right? We just I chose to ignore that in the past, right? I knew, oh, this person is not available, but I'm going to make them available. That's what I'm going to achieve that, right? And if I don't, then I can just prove to myself that I'm not enough, or I'm a sucker, I'm a failure. Whatever there is that I get to prove about myself. So yeah, that's how life works. It always gives us the right partner at any given moment in time so that we can understand something about us. Sometimes that's painful. And yeah, just something that I always witness on the other side of seeing that subconscious pattern playing out. That's where a lot of the things are that we really want in life.
And say someone's listening to this and they have the pattern of the unavailable partners. They do the magic of attracting unavailable partners. You know, they start to, they've got it. They can see like, okay, I have this pattern of attracting unavailable partners, and some of that is around kind of self-worth, believing that, that's all I'm worthy of. What can they start to implement and do in their lives to turn that around? They've identified that it comes from they had an unavailable mother or unavailable father. What can they start to do to kind of turn this all around in their own lives, in their dating lives?
So one very powerful thing anyone can do is to realize how powerful our own minds are. So if we take that example here, someone who keeps attracting unavailable people. All right, maybe there's something, let's take myself as the example. For a very, very long time in my life, I had this belief about myself, whereas it's not so much a belief, it's even deeper than that. Something that I thought who I wasn't good enough. So all I really do when I think that's who I am is I will attract people that mirror that to me, that show that to me. They just confirm that to me, or I confirm it to myself by virtue of attracting these people. So something that we can do is get to the bottom of, right? My mother wasn't available. My father wasn't available. What did I make that mean about myself? Right? It's when because my mother wasn't available, right? Something that, to take it back to the example of myself, I always thought I wasn't able to help her. I didn't do a good enough job to help her, to make her available, meaning I'm not enough. I'm not enough. That's what I kept attracting. I kept attracting people that showed me, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. Or to make it even more powerful, I confirmed it to myself through all of my experience, I'm not enough. And then to see that that's just a story. It's just boring words in our head, right? To really see, all I'm trying to do is disprove a story that I have learned at a very young age about myself. But where else does it exist other than in my head? It's just a story. And when we can see the fragility of this statement that I'm not enough, right? It's not about, I'm telling myself that I am enough. It's just to understand it's just a story. It's just these words. When we discard them, what becomes available? Right? If you're not enough, what's possible for you? How can you show up differently in your relationship? How can you show up differently towards yourself? Because we usually are our biggest critic. So how can we treat ourselves differently? Right? So using the people, no, not using sounds very bad in this context, but using meeting the people as a chance to understand, okay, there seems to be something deeper in us, in me, that makes me attract these same patterns, these same behaviors, in this example, these unavailable people. Now, if I have someone that's unavailable in my life, what does that mean to me? I don't get something, right? I don't get love. So why don't I get love? Why is it that I do not get love? And there's usually an answer that people have to that. Because I'm a bad person, therefore I don't get love. I'm not enough, therefore I don't get love. Right? So you can do that by yourself. You can sit at home with a diary and think about what must I think about myself? And where's the evidence? Then we have evidence in our childhoods, how our father treated us, how our mother treated us. But still, just because it's someone that's very close to us, our mother, our brother, our father, doesn't make it a truth. It's still just a story. Right? So that's one of the first things I invite people to do. And if they don't access it by themselves, get someone to help them see that, to get to the bottom of these stories. Who do I believe myself to be, that this is what I'm attracting in my life?
And these stories are so powerful, right? As you described there, and we've all got stories. We've all got some little stories we're running, or you can call them stories, you call them beliefs, you got them truths that we believe, like absolute truths that are true, like, I only attract available partners, or, deeper things like that. Like, I'm not good enough. I'm not deserving of love, or, I'm not capable. I don't know the right way, all these things. I did some work with a coach called William Whitecloud, and he has what he calls kind of 12 fundamental dysfunctional beliefs that we have. And these are the kind of core things, like we're unlovable, I don't belong, how all these play out. And we've often spent our whole life seeking to disprove, but seeking also to prove that there's a truth in this belief. And we have an evidence bag. I like to call it evidence bag, because if you said to someone, what's the evidence that, you don't deserve love, you're unlovable? And they could reel you off evidence that they could have since they were 4 years old, that girl or guy in the schoolyard. Yeah. And you go, okay, cool. And I love the question I like to ask people is like, okay, can you tell me about some evidence to the contrary of that? Tell me some evidence. What evidence do you have that actually goes against that belief, that, that maybe is an evidence to that you are lovable? And I always find this a really fascinating question, because they kind of pause and go, oh, there isn't any. I'll go, okay, I'm just inviting you. No matter how big or small it is, tell me what's there. And you start to dig around in this other evidence bag, and this evidence bag isn't as well filled up, and it's not been itemized as well. It's not have all the little bits that have really paid attention to over the years. But then you start to find there's all this evidence of like, oh, actually, there was this woman actually, and she really wanted to love me, and I wasn't really into her. Or actually, on my 15th birthday, my father bought me this really lovely ring. And you start to see, and you start to kind of find a different evidence. Or even in this present moment, people go, actually, my boss is really kind to me. And I've got this friend who always checks in on me. And you're like, wow, there's all this evidence of people trying to love you. How do you react to those things when they happen? Yeah, I love this piece of question. How do you react to those things when they happen? And it's what's fascinating. It's not always the case. Sometimes people are, I'm really, really grateful. But often there's like some level of, I didn't really believe that's what it was. I believed it. They was some other thing. They wanted something. It wasn't love. It was like they were obligated to do that. They felt like they have to do that. They should do that. And you're like, interesting. So when there's evidence of not loving you, that's what it is. But when there's evidence of loving you, or you're being loved, it can't possibly really be that. It has to be some other thing, and just being like, do you see how
exactly
you're not gathering evidence like a real detective?
Yeah, no. And that's exactly it, right? And it's the ego, or that part of us, just wants to be right about that, right? We believe we're not good enough. And based on that, right, that whole construct of I'm not enough, right? If we have that, looking at myself again, I really like to use myself as an example because it's so accessible, but right, I wasn't good enough. So my whole existence was about proving that I am enough. So I tried to be the best in sports. I tried to be the best at work, to have the best career, be the best boyfriend that ever existed, right? I tried to disprove that. That was my whole existence. And it was a way that my ego was making sense of the world, right? So if now there's a challenging belief, that would mean I have to learn to operate in the world in a very new way. There's a lot of fear that comes up. And there's a lot of things, right? It's just so much easier to discard it and say, well, if that person thinks that I am enough, there must be something severely wrong with them, right? I can't be wrong about my inadequacy. I've been right about that for 30 years already, for 25 years. And this person comes along and says, I am enough? They must have a big problem, right? So that's how we operate then. And yeah, it's so futile and it's so convincing. And just also to speak that we have to discard what other people, right? Something that challenges our own view of ourselves, right? Our view of ourselves is we're not enough. So if someone says we are, easier to discard that, unfortunately.
Because there's a part of us that, is so striving to be right. This ego that's like, it just wants to be right. And we see this, I see this play out like in the outside world, and I pay a lot of attention to the kind of love and dating and relationship world, is people want to be right. They're so committed to being right about themselves or the world and how the world is. Yeah. And they're so determined, feverish, almost in their determination to be right.
Yeah, but look, it makes sense, right? Because when you think about it, where does it come from? And it comes from our earliest childhood experiences, right? So when we're a child, we want to belong. We need to belong. If we didn't belong, we would not be able to survive. So if our parents, right, to make it a bit simpler, if our parents keep criticizing us or keep telling us off for certain behavior, we get love taken away. Some people get punished or they get sent to the room, right? Love is taken away. So we start to understand, if I do this, love is taken away. I need to belong in order to survive. So it's much easier to discard ourselves, to say, okay, there must be something wrong with me. Because if we started to see, okay, no, my parents, they must have the problem. What's the consequence? We maybe wouldn't listen to them. We wouldn't stick to the rules. And that might mean more discarding, even less love, even less acceptance. So it becomes imperative for us to believe that we are wrong. Because that's how we can survive. It's probably like this is the evolutionary reason why humans were able to survive, because, right, as a child, we believe everything our parents say, so at least we can survive. And that's how we kept it until now. And that's why it's so deep, because if our story, if our belief isn't right, and it isn't, it's never, then it must mean that all of these experiences weren't really what I thought they were. And my parents saw me differently, right? If I'm not enough, if that's actually not true, then it was just a projection from my parents. So they must have that problem, right? That's where we can start to see how generational trauma is being handed from one generation to the next one. Yeah. We need to hold on to it, because at one point in our life, it felt to us as if that was imperative to survive. Yeah.
And we haven't realized that time is over. I have this kind of idea. I believe that all children must rebel at some point against their parents, in some capacity, against their parents' like way of being, their parents' way of living, to kind of challenge this thinking and idea. And we see in teenagers, and we see in teenagers a lot, that this rebelliousness to kind of individualization, to go off and be like, I've spent my whole life, paying attention to how you see the world and thinking that how you see the world is right. often teenagers go into this mode of seeing everything their parents do is wrong and bad and stupid. And I see it as almost this necessary stage, but what I'm hearing there's like a deeper stage of this, of seeing the beliefs that we've kind of been instilled in us and from our parents and so forth, and actually kind of seeing those projections as not true, as like almost another stage of like really growing into maturity as well.
Exactly. And when we still try to prove to our parents, if they are alive or not, that we are good enough, right? Then we actually haven't matured from that. We haven't grown out of the child's position. And most likely because our parents, to no fault of their own, they have struggled with the same thing and haven't been able to break free from that, haven't been able to mature from that. So yeah, I believe it is absolutely necessary to transcend that, to understand that. And then we become mature, emotionally mature, but also as adults. And ideally, right, and in an ideal world, that's something that our parents would be able to give us or to show us, that who we are, just how we are, with our quote unquote imperfections, with everything that we do. We're worthy of loving, we're okay, we're wanted, right? We're all of these things. But of course, nobody is perfect. And so we slip up, our parents slip up, and then we got these woundings to heal. Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's the message we are looking for, is, or we really desire to experience. It's not just to know, because someone can tell you, you're whole, you're complete, and you're lovable as you are. It's the experience that we need to have, to experience the embodied experience of our wholeness and our lovableness and love and connectedness. It's the experience that we're really searching for having.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, we all want to belong. We all want to be accepted. And right, not for the facade that we put forward, not for the mask that we put on. Because as long as we show that, we can never really have the feeling of, okay, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, no matter what I need or what I don't need, I can be lost for that. But it's scary. And especially because it's not just in our families that we learn that, it's also in school, in society, with our friends, that we get these micro or macro rejections that lead us to believe that there's something wrong with us, that we aren't lovable for who we are. And it's a very sad story, actually, because we're all like, when we come to this world, every baby, right? Everybody always says, wow, this is such a beautiful baby. And the baby doesn't need to do anything to garner love and acceptance. They just are. And then later on in life, we believe we need that money, we need the car, we need to be perfect in the relationship, in our career, in whatever we believe we need to excel in. Yeah, and understanding that that's not the truth is the pathway to liberation.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple.
Simple, yeah, simple, but it's hard. It's a process, but very, very, very much worthy of doing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's crazy, like you said, the cars and everything, because we grow up in a society that consciously and unconsciously tells us to be lovable and to get what you want and to be admired and get attention and to get the love that a baby gets. You have to do something. You need to be doing something, of value. You touched on it when you described your own experience of kind of chasing and being the best boyfriend and being the nice guy and stuff, it's just all in the doing. Or we go in the direction sometimes of like money, like I need to have the money, I need to have the car, as you mentioned, or we need to look good and we need to be pretty, or we need to be successful. And it creates this world that we have of like endless doing and consuming and creating and consuming, in the hope that eventually we'll have that sensation of just feeling whole and being loved, when it really is not accessible through those things.
Yeah. And as I recently heard in a video from Aaron Doughty, I don't know if you know him. He spoke about, I mean, he quoted it from someone else, but what he basically said is, right, if just imagine a friend of yours is in a car accident and you would go to visit that friend in the hospital, right? And that friend wakes up from that horrible accident and is alive, right? And they would say, oh, I still need to do this, I still need to do that, still need to get this next promotion, whatever, right? The only thing you are happy about is that that person is there, right? Just because they are, that's why you're happy, right? Not because they've achieved something, but simply because they were able to open their eyes again and they are still here. We can be with them, you can be with them, right? And just having that energy, right? People are worthy of love just because they are there. That's all they need to do. And yeah, I certainly believed these things growing up, right? I noticed, okay, when I achieve to be the best in that kind of sport, I get a lot of applause here. I get a lot of smiley faces, right? And when you're smart, or even when you're not smart, you see, I think it's good to be good in this kind of stuff. I'm getting good grades. I get a lot of appreciation here. Let me continue that, right? And then we equate that with love. Whereas that's just conditional appreciation, right? It's not love.
Yeah, I'm mistaking conditional appreciation for unconditional love, or love in general.
Yeah, love is always unconditional. If it's not unconditional, then it's not love. Easy.
Yeah. And I I see the time is running away from us. And I say that because I think we could easily weave through another couple of topics and talk for hours on end. It's so easy to talk to you and so beautiful to, as you said, the being your presence and just dance through the intricacies of some of these topics of we've covered so much today. And yeah, I just wanted to say, huge thank you to you for coming back for the first time. And for such an enthralling conversation. And then just weaving through all these different strands and it coming back to some really simple pieces, around how this story we tell ourselves, how we can, cultivate a relationship of giving ourselves what we need, observing our patterns, and being lovable, telling ourselves, experiencing ourselves as lovable. So I imagine the wonderful listeners are wondering where they can hear more from you, where they can see your wonderful videos that I've described already, and maybe even work with you if they'd like to.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much, David, for having me here, for creating this beautiful platform so that I can speak here with you. And also thank you for your appreciation, your conditional appreciation for my saying things here on your podcast. I really enjoy being with you and your questions. You have a very beautiful presence around you. I enjoy that. And yeah, if people want to work with me, they can find me on my Instagram page. It's Sven_Loss. I do one-on-one coaching. I do group coaching. There will be another intake towards autumn this year. Autumn on the northern hemisphere of the world. And yeah, I have all the links on my website, on my Instagram. So that's where people can find it. And they can find all the videos that you mentioned at the beginning, my content that is hopefully helpful to the people that find it.
Very helpful to the people that find it. So we implore you, listeners, to head over to Sven's page and check out some of the videos. I think you get a lot for what's going on for you in your dating life and your relationships as well. And I'll wrap up by telling the listeners, actually, this episode, there's probably someone in your life who these patterns, you probably observed these patterns in them. Or if it's not you, you've observed it's a friend, it's a family member. Send the episode to them to help them with their awareness, to help them. And I know sometimes you hear, as a person, you hear that and you're like, oh, they're going to think badly of me and so forth. But you're in service of them, in service of the greater good that they're trying to create in life, which is love and connection and wholeness and joy. And as much as they may feel that initial pain of like, oh God, that's me, that will open up the door for them to actually do something about it instead of just wallowing around and complaining about being unavailable partners. So please do share this with somebody else, so they can take the beautiful wisdom that we've shared today, that Sven shared today, into their life as well. But with that said, listeners, big thank you to Sven for being here today, and thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day. And I say ciao, ciao. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world, especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.